Hey everybody, what's good? I need to enunciate every time.
Is it enunciate or enunciate?
I think it's enunciate.
Enunciate.
Shit, we can't enunciate if we don't even know the word.
What's the deal?
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 Yo, what's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal? What's the deal? Hey, what's the deal?
What's good, everybody? I'm Steve Discourse.
Dominique Lamb.
And we're back with another episode of What's the Deal? Dominique, of course, is not my normal co-host. Jay Callie is out this week, but thank you so much for coming through and co-hosting today. Stories we got on the radar today is in the last week, 3 Democratic members of Congress have died, so we're going to just mention that real quick.
Yeah. Trump was booed at the World Series.
Surprise, surprise. Bernie's response to a question at a rally about police stops drew some criticism recently.
Yes, and in PG County, a man was paralyzed from the waist down at a routine traffic stop.
And on a similar note, an 11-year-old girl in New Mexico was assaulted by a police officer over school milk.
Wow. And how that relates to the Chicago teachers are still on strike.
Yeah, we're going to tie it all in together. So, but before we get into all that, people are still wondering, who is this woman
right
on the mic right now? So, Dominique Lamb, you practice real estate.
Yes.
And you have a nonprofit called
Yes,
We Teach Love.
I do.
And We Teach Love is also the name of a hit podcast.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So tell us about that real quick, about the nonprofit and the podcast.
So the nonprofit is called We Teach Love again, and it's the mission we have is to eliminate interpersonal abuse by teaching healthy relationships. So we use the podcast as one of the ways that we teach about what healthy relationships look like, as opposed to, like a lot of times you hear about the red flags and what you should look out for to see if you're in an unhealthy relationship. We're actually teaching the model for what a healthy relationship looks like. So
that's all right. That's interesting because I feel like, a lot of service providing in all types of areas of life is probably more related to, identifying problem areas and things rather than just kind of affirmative methods, right?
Mm-hmm. Much more reactive than preventative.
And who's on the podcast with you?
My business partner, Rachel, shout out to her. She and I wrote a curriculum together on what healthy relationships look like. And she's also a life coach and a personal trainer. So we do the podcast and we also do videos every Friday called Friday Love Fest.
I've seen the videos and I've listened to the podcast. I like your guys' your two's chemistry on the podcast. It's very conversational for people who haven't listened yet. It's there's a lot of like personal experiences balanced in with just the general best practices and good advice and everything.
Yes.
So people will probably be able to find it relatable.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's all on purpose. I am a survivor of domestic violence, and I sort of started my foray into this area working for domestic violence awareness agencies and doing a lot of that reactive work, which is really important because there are people who are, in the situation right now. But what I realized in that work is that there's very little money, resources, energy, effort put forth toward preventing people from being in that situation in the first place. And I know for me personally, it would have been really helpful if I had that education early on. I could have avoided a lot of unhealthy behavior.
And so that's why all your work is called We Teach Love.
Yes.
To be proactive in that, right? Rather than teach those red flags.
Exactly.
Okay. Very cool. You own a real estate brokerage.
Yes.
Which means what?
So we all are familiar with like sort of the bigger companies like Long and Foster and Remax and Keller Williams, and those are actually
Century
my
21?
peers. Yeah, Century
Okay.
21. Any of those big names, those are brokerage houses or brokerages, and they're also my peers technically because I am a broker. So I have a couple agents that work for me. I'm working on expanding to different states. Right now we're in DC and Maryland. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that word. You have a couple agents. What's the difference between a broker and an agent?
So an agent, I'm still technically a real estate licensee, an agent where I can help you buy or sell a house. But every agent has to be affiliated with a broker in order to work. So I have agents that are affiliated with my brokerage, and I mentor them and supervise their work and give them advice on, how to best practice real estate, according to me, because it's really broker to broker.
Okay.
And yeah, if you're an agent, you've got to be affiliated with a broker. But if you're a broker, you're putting your license on the line by having people affiliated with you.
Okay. Okay, stress. So
yes.
You're from the area, right? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in PG County.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've seen insane change. We were actually just talking about this earlier before we started recording. You've seen insane change over the course of your lifetime. Mm-hmm. How do you, according to you, practice real estate in this area? And given those changes, how do you feel about those changes?
Right.
I don't know. Give me something.
I mean, it can be stressful because it's nice to see that this area is still thriving and this area is still, welcoming a lot of people. But at the same time, it's challenging because a lot of people, in order to welcome people, a lot of people are being displaced. So I've seen, and I think probably what's most challenging is some of the language around what's happening. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say, that an area is being developed. And it's like, but that area was already developed. People already lived there. There was already a culture. There was already a neighborhood. So it's being maybe redeveloped. But I've just some of that language where people, sort of discount what was already there. Because now there are more chain stores and, Starbucks is definitely a challenge. But I don't know. I love being in this area. I love the culture that we have that's unique here. And so it can be a challenge when, an influx of people is more interested in sort of erasing that culture or muting it and, staking out their own piece, because it's just kind of like, well, we want to preserve what we have too.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing because in parts it's the old culture that draws people here.
Exactly.
And I think part of the issue we have with urban gentrification right now is that it's kind of a cyclical thing where for decades you wanted to get out to the suburbs, and now that's, we're going back into cities. So in part it's the attraction of that culture, but I think in general it's kind of a generational thing where we want to get back, whether it's, you feel like it's ecological or something, so you don't have to commute and do these things. We're having smaller family sizes, so you don't need that as much. So it's really complicated, but I think what's a lot of the tension comes from people coming in and not respecting the space that they're entering into.
Right.
Whether that's last year I remember it got everybody crazy. This woman in Brooklyn called the police on an ice cream truck or something that had been there for years, and they did the same thing we've always been doing. And now you call the police, and it's if you're gonna come into a place, we all move. That's the way American culture is. We're not tied geographically anymore, right? We follow jobs, we follow money and things like that.
Right.
Who knows why we transplanted for whatever reason, but so we can't tell people to not relocate and go where they want.
Right.
But I think you got to really respect the space that you're coming into, right?
And that means exploring and investigating what you're coming into and really understanding the history and what was already there so that you can be respectful and appreciative of what's there, and then find your place, to fit in with that. Like, how do you contribute to what's already there instead of uprooting it, so that you can fit in?
Speaking of uprooting, that's a perfect segue. As far as advice or commentary on people already here facing these pressures, I know you mentioned to me earlier that you got a letter in the mail, someone offering to buy a house, and some of these more like egregious, exploitative kind of situations have been reported in different outlets all across the country or whatever, where people are kind of being a little unscrupulous, or some people are getting really lowballed. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what should people be on the lookout for if they're already in these spaces historically?
Yeah. So I was telling you that I got a letter. I own property in D.C., and I got a letter offering to purchase my property, something that said, that they knew that I owned it, and, that they were, wanted to make an offer. There weren't any details in the letter about what that offer looked like, but it was very like time sensitive. Like, if you don't respond in a couple of days kind of thing, like, this is a limited time offer. And it made me think, if you are a person or family that is, maybe going through some challenging times financially, you would be more likely to respond favorably to something like that. And you might actually be taken advantage of because of it. A lot of people, are interested in wholesaling and flipping and doing things like that. And so they're targeting people who they think would sell their property under market value, so that person can then turn around and flip it for more money. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with making a profit on, the sale of real estate, but there is something, in my opinion, unethical about targeting people who, may not know what their rights are, may not know how to advocate for themselves. They don't know the real estate law. They're less likely to hire a realtor, for example, to represent them. And, the letter that I got was saying that was all, to your advantage. You don't have to pay a commission. And it's like, but you also miss out on, the people who are held to a higher standard because they have a license. They're going to protect you, and you're missing out on that protection, and not being advised of how much your property is really worth.
Well, so that might be an interesting point to reiterate, is that so it may seem like there's costs associated with having a real estate agent, but they're legally required to act in your interest.
Right.
Okay.
And if they don't, you have legal remedy. Whereas this person who writes you a letter and says, hey, I'm going to buy your house and I'll give you this much for it, they can take advantage of you, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You can sue them or something, but there's nothing already put in place for you to, address what happened.
Okay. Last question is it safe to say that, if you receive one of these letters, and it sounds like people are referring to some urgency or sensitivity of an issue, is it safe to assume that there's no issue like that related to your house that you shouldn't already theoretically know about? Like, could any situation be happening to your house that some speculator or investor found out about that somehow you would not have already been alerted first?
Definitely. There might be some development happening. There might be something may be coming to your neighborhood where they know that property value is going to spike. And so it's in their best interest to buy up low cost property before that spike happens. It's just like stock. Like, if it's almost like insider trading. If you know that, this company is about to make a lot of money, then you buy all the shares while it's still cheap. That's essentially what's happening. So it's very possible that if you're not, and I mean, the people that we're talking about who may own property and not know are, already overburdened with a host of other things. They're not necessarily paying attention to what may be coming to the neighborhood and what that means for their property, because, they work every day. They, they have other priorities. So right. Yes, it's very fair to say that you may not know why this person is so interested in buying your property. But if they are, it's because they can make some sort of profit.
Okay. Well, if any of this was interesting to everybody listening, shameless plug, Dominique and I are working on developing a podcast right now to talk about all things related to real estate and property. And that doesn't mean how to buy, how to sell, how to invest, how to speculate. It means a topic that we, Jay Callie and I spoke about recently, homelessness, gentrification. We've got a long list of theoretical ways we can take this. So we're gonna be talking about a lot of things to do with this, because there's a lot of real estate podcasts out there, but when they say we talk about everything in real estate, they really mean in the buying and selling and how to making money aspect of real estate. But we've got something in the works for 2020.
Yes.
So that's gonna be pretty
I'm really
sweet.
excited. Yeah.
So
all things related, all of the things on the outskirts that are really important that don't get enough airtime.
Yeah, so looking forward to that. We're working on that in the meantime. So let's get back to the news.
Okay.
Should we do it?
Yes.
So not a lot to say about this, but it seemed notable. I guess they say deaths come in threes.
Yes,
they
do.
They do say that. And so in the last week, well, there's been some high-profile deaths of members of Congress from the Democratic Party. So just yesterday, a senator from Senator Hagan from North Carolina, first woman elected to North Carolina, to the Senate in North Carolina. She died at 66 from a long-term battle with long-term disease. John Conyers, longtime congressman from Michigan, also died yesterday. He was 90.
Wow.
I was way off. Yeah, he's old. He was quite old, so he got up there, but he was one of the founding members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yeah.
And honestly, caucus is a word that gets thrown out in political conversations a lot, but most people hear it and don't know what it means. It's just like a group of people to get together and work on strategy and planning. And so the Democratic caucus is a bunch of people who aren't necessarily Democratic congressmen or senators or whoever. It could be you, me, anybody, or same with Republican, and we get together and have a conference, whether that's a conference in a big capital C version of like a whole week, or whether we just all get to lunch once a month and we say, what are we going to do about organizing our neighborhood or something? It's how you get together. So that's the Congressional Black Caucus is related to how they do that at the congressional federal level, of which they just had their annual conference last month.
Yeah, in September.
Yeah. So that's what a caucus is. I just thought I would bring that up because it really, the word flies out there all the time, but people don't necessarily know exactly what it means.
Yeah, I agree.
And then of course Elijah Cummings passed away recently as well.
I think he was 68.
Yeah, and he made headlines recently for getting into it with Donald Trump, who insulted the city of Baltimore, including parts of that city which Elijah Cummings represented.
Yeah.
So
he also was felt really strongly about the impeachment inquiries. So he's one of those people who was, a loud voice.
Yeah, and
more recently around that.
And definitely a civil rights icon is how a lot of people referred to him. So 3 relatively high-profile elected officials died recently. So we thought that was worth mentioning, for different historical reasons. But that's pretty much it. I think we can leave that there. What was the next story we were going to do? Oh, you watch baseball?
I have an interesting relationship with baseball. So I don't watch it, but my grandfather is a huge, huge fan. My grandfather actually played in the Negro Leagues when he was younger. And so my whole family just showers him with baseball, everything, because he loves it. So that's my only connection. Baseball is just really long for me. It just takes a really long time.
Yeah. I like going to the game. I'll hang out because we can talk. Again, it's easy to just hang out at the game. Yeah. You don't have to really watch.
Exactly.
But we should have been watching on Sunday.
I know.
Who was watching the World Series Game 5? Because
Yeah.
El Presidente. He wouldn't like that if we call him El Presidente. So let's just be provocative. It's no secret, all right? I'm fair and balanced here, just like Fox News, but I'm not a fan of Trump. Donald Trump went to the World Series, Game 5, and when he was introduced was soundly booed.
Yeah.
And they chanted, "Lock him up." Mm-hmm. Which you got to love the irony of that.
Right. Flipping it on its head.
So I missed that. Fortunately, we, of course, record out of D.C. Fortunately, we missed the absolute slapping that the Nationals faced. Other than that, baseball, World Series, not really my thing. But when it gets political, I like to jump in the fray.
That was great.
Yeah. There was
great crowd.
Yeah.
Good job.
So Bernie Sanders.
We're going to
get into the meat of it, everybody. These were just two light conversations, really just I just referred to the three people's deaths as a light conversation.
That was a big deal.
Not what I meant.
Yeah.
Surface level, we didn't really get too deep in them. But
they're not controversial at all.
Right.
And so there's that. We just wanted to pay our respects.
Bernie was at an event at Benedict College, Columbia, South Carolina, a historically black college.
Yep.
And he got a question about...
He had a really interesting question.
From a young black man, said, what would you tell your son, if I was your son,
right.
What would you tell me to do? What would be your advice if I were stopped in an altercation with police?
And this, I think, is an interesting question because black people refer to this as the talk, right? That you have, like, parents have to have the talk with their children about how to navigate and maneuver with police officers. And it's, it's considered unique to the black community because the talk is usually like the birds and the bees. But the talk in the black community is about police and, for him to ask Bernie, like, how would you have the talk with me if I were your son, I think is really interesting because it's what most black parents would say. It probably wouldn't be popular for Bernie to say. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, I don't even need to know what Bernie said, and I know what he said, but I don't even need to know what his answer was to know that's going to be controversial.
So it was kind of a tricky situation in the first place for him?
Yeah.
Well, all right, so two things. One, what most black parents would say.
So most black parents would say, don't talk back, like, keep your hands where the police officer can see them. Don't talk back. Don't say anything rude or disrespectful. Give them whatever they're asking for. Basically, just focus on getting home safely and not whether or not you're being treated fairly. Like, let it be about survival and not what your rights are and not, whether or not they had the right to stop you or ask you to get out of the car or cuff you or anything like that. Don't ask questions. Just focus on getting whatever you have to do to get home safely. So if that's what your parent would say, if Bernie said that to me, that would be super controversial.
And he said...
I think he said something along those lines, like,
basically,
be respectful.
I don't think it's worth quoting him directly because it sort of gets to a level of semantics, and if we don't get it exactly right, the substance of the conversation won't change. But yeah, he said to get and give information as respectfully as possible. And specifically, I think he said get the officer's information.
Yeah, like get their name.
Yeah, which I think is fair. But so that's interesting. So the criticism drawn against him was that, we all know that's not going to get the result you want, and bad things happen regardless of that. Right,
and that's the criticism actually toward black parents' advice is that's not enough. Right. Well, there's a few criticisms. Let me step back. One, that's not enough to get you home safely. Being respectful and not questioning the police and things like that's not enough to get you home safely. But then also, of course, the obvious elephant in the room is that this is something only Black people have to do, right? That's the idea, is that only Black people have to be the perfect, gentleman or the perfect lady when dealing with a police officer so that they get away with their lives. And that means the stakes are too high. If you could, say something that the police officer finds disrespectful and possibly lose your life, that's ridiculous. And this is not a talk, again, that anyone else has to have with their kids in America.
It's definitely nothing that ever came up growing up for me.
Yeah.
Not at all. And a conversation with how to engage with police was nowhere near the radar of something that I would need to learn from my folks. But it also strikes me as, I don't know if it's unreasonable, but to ask Bernie Sanders, who's a white man, of course, what would you do as a Black parent? Almost, is unreasonable accurate for that? And not to whether you think what he said was right or wrong, you can still have that opinion, but
he did try to
answer that right. I don't know, because how can he put fully himself in that position?
I'm not really sure what he should have said, but I think what the question is sort of a rhetorical question, and what it's getting at, in my opinion, is what are you going to do about what's happening? If you're president, not if you're my dad, if you're president, what are you going to do about the fact that this is happening? What are you going to do about the fact that I could be as kind and respectful and polite as possible and still might lose my life?
Yeah. Well, and so maybe that's really the only right answer he could have gave is, well, I can't put myself in the shoes of a Black parent, but this is what I would do.
Exactly.
So at any rate, this conversation isn't important because of what Bernie said. It's important because, it has implications for everybody in real life on both sides. Because if you're not Black, we still have some culpability in another, because we all feel some way or another. White people with nothing to do with Black people, quote unquote, in any way, have nothing to do with this conversation, will feel some kind of way, because it ends up now, the debate between police and law enforcement and the Black community ends up being racial, bar none. You never thought about police, or you never thought about Black people, you never thought about anything. You just go to life, live your life, go to school and work and whatever. Now you're triggered over here. So we've all got to keep grappling with this.
While we're on this break, we want to remind you, do not forget to share the podcast. Share it to all of your social media platforms, your Facebook, your Instagram, Twitter. Don't forget to use the hashtag #What'sTheDealPod whenever you share anything. And like and subscribe the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you listen. Thanks for spreading the love. We appreciate you. Can we get to it? What am I saying?
So basically, we need to record a quick message telling listeners what we want to do. We got a lot of plans that we want to roll out. We want to upgrade the show a little bit, make it a little bit bigger, better. We want to upgrade our social media presence a little bit, and that we need to raise some funds for this.
Okay, I got it. Here we go. What's good, everybody? It's your girl, Jay Callie, coming to beg and plead with you to send us a little bit of cash, a little bit of dough, a little bit of green, guap, moolah. You know what we're talking about. Please, we need your support to keep the show going, to keep the show amazing. If you would like to send us financial payments, you can send it to us through Cash App. Our Cash App and Venmo have the same handle, WTD Pod. If you are so gracious, if you would like to send us monthly, what is it called? Automated payments, you can hit us up on Patreon at www.patreon.com/what'sthedeal. You can send us 5 cents a month, $5 a month, $500 a month. It depends on your pockets, and I am not counting yours. You know what you have, and you know what you can give. We appreciate ya. Thank you.
Do you want to tell us about the traffic stop in Prince George's County in Maryland? We are not very far from where this took place, so lay it out.
So there was a young man, I want to say he was maybe 24, and now he is paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life because he was stopped by police for expired tags. And they also said in the article that I read that he was driving with a learner's permit and that the car smelled of marijuana. But it seems like at some point the police officer called for backup. I don't know if he was planning to arrest him or what the plan was, but he called for backup. 2 other police officers arrived, and then some sort of physical something happened where he ended up being severely injured with a broken nose and is now paralyzed.
And so that's what the talk is about for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
How do you get pulled over for expired tags?
And
how do you get identified
paralyzed
as learner's permit?
Right.
Okay, whatever. Like I'm sure a lot of us are driving on learner's permit. Yes. We're driving sometime.
Yes.
And I've probably brought this up in these conversations before. I was in an accident. Somebody hit me, but I was in an accident, and my license was expired flat out. And I got a ticket for that on my way.
Right.
And I went and got my license before court, and then they said, okay, fine is out. See you later. No problem, right? Violence, any physicality would never have needed to cross my mind.
Right.
Right? And the problem, I think, is for people who think like that, who have my perspective on this, we're unwilling or unable to say, okay, but there's a whole very uniform, very widely known, very prevalent perspective on this that is completely different from mine. Why and how and what and like what do we do?
Yeah.
But instead we shut down and we get defensive about it, and that's not the right way to go, because you got to ask yourself, in a traffic stop like this, who cares what he did?
Right.
Like the man's paralyzed now. Is that enough? Is that what we want?
Right. But it's not, if it's not your experience, I think it's so hard to understand that perspective. It's hard to find capacity, I think, when it's not your experience, when it's not someone you know, right? I'm sure if he had any friends that were not black, any, white friends, any friends that were not black that didn't have this experience, now they have a different perspective on like police brutality and, using too much force. Like now, because of their proximity to him, they have more capacity, which is unfortunate, but it's hard for us, like just as humans, to see things outside of our bubble until we're exposed, and until we are closer to it. You know what I mean? So we just think, like it didn't happen to me, but it's news. It's something that's happening, but it didn't happen to me or anyone I know. So,
I mean, that, you know what? And hearing you say that, I mean, this is more of a conversation to be had, not on a current events and like talk show that I'm having. We need to have, like, where are the psychologists and emotional behavioral therapists and stuff? Where are they? This is the conversation they need to have.
We need to be promoting emotional intelligence.
We might, because we address this on the show all the time, because sadly there's just no shortage of these situations. But all I can do is rationally kind of point out my perspective, but I don't know how effective or what help I can offer if this is really about an emotional, psychological kind of block. I don't know how to talk to somebody through that. I'm trying to rationally unpack it for them, but I mean, that's not enough a lot of times. At
the very least, the same issue that we're describing, right, that people have in observing the situation is the same issue that police, I'm speculating now, but police have in the situation. My opinion is that they don't relate to the person that they're, pulling over. They, it's easy for you to say, I've had an expired license. So I've been in that situation and got a ticket and it was fine. But there is something about the way that some police officers see Black people when they pull them over, oh, you've got a learner's permit. There was a kid in the car. Your tags are expired. I smell marijuana. That is like, he can't relate at all. Doesn't, have, I'm guessing, the capacity to try to relate to this person. And so then that puts you in a position where you can treat him like he's not your equal, like he's not a person. And
we had another story that we wanted to link to this, but I think we got to keep moving on a little bit. But that's a perfect segue into what we did plan to follow up with, is that just recently in New Mexico, an officer resigned because he was caught on tape. The video showed him assaulting an 11-year-old girl at a school for reasons he says she assaulted some administrators, which from the reporting and the videos, it means she pushed a principal out of her way to leave the building. And okay, assault, come on, right? Yes. But it all stemmed over her maybe general misbehavior and her reluctance to kind of fall in line with directions. So, okay, she misbehaves. And this particular day, she had taken more milk from the cafeteria than was allotted to her for whatever reason. And so the video shows him running up to her, trying to take her backpack off. She turns, doesn't know, hold on, what's going on, forcing that, pushes her into the wall, puts her to the ground. And your comment, it had me thinking about this the whole time. Would he want his 11-year-old daughter treated that way?
Right. For taking more milk than you're supposed to.
But he can't see his daughter in this girl, right? And maybe his daughter doesn't misbehave. She's a perfect angel. Yeah. Fine.
But there's also the fear aspect, right? Like these police officers can't see how the person that's being targeted could be more fearful, right? So this 11-year-old is now trying to run, not because she's some criminal who's like, let me...
Milk thief.
Right, some milk thief. She may be afraid. The same case with the guy. I don't know what happened, but at the point where I know as a Black person that I have fear when I'm around police. When I get pulled over, I am fearful. I do think of the worst. I can only imagine how much scarier it would be if then 2 more cops were called. And now there are 3 of them. I would feel there's no understanding, it seems, of how people act when they're afraid. It doesn't mean that they're more of a threat because now they're trying to run. They're afraid, but we don't have that.
And that's an interesting take that you see, and this is where your slightly different training than mine comes in, because that's a take that I don't know that we've explored on this show before. Because when he first engaged this little girl, she's saying like, no, I'm trying to leave. My mom is at the school. I'm trying to leave. Yeah. She's here to pick me up.
Yeah.
And that, while no doubt she wanted to just get to her mom, that wasn't necessarily like, yo, I'm a milk thief. Get off of me. Yo, I'm trying to leave. It could have been like she was scared. And I mean, in kids, no doubt, they're learning how to deal with their emotions, right? And even adults, we don't know how to handle our emotions, right?
A 24-year-old?
So she could have been scared. And so what do you do when you're a threat? I want to see my mom, essentially, right? And we don't know what was in her head, but it could have been that. Or it could have been, she's a badass. She's just a devil child. But you're assaulting children over milk, bro. I'm not trying to pay your salary for that. Is that why we trained you? And is that what that body armor's for? To beat up little kids?
They use fear. Police use fear as their reason for their action all the time, but can't relate to how someone would be afraid. You have a gun and training, and you're afraid. So how could an 11-year-old not be afraid? Could this man not be afraid when he was pulled over for tags and now there are 3 cops surrounding him? Yeah. So it's really interesting because, I don't want to pay a cop to be trained and learn all these things and then go and tackle milk thieves at school.
Right. Right. And here's where we wrap it up and tie it in for the last topic of the day is the Chicago teachers strike.
Yeah.
We talked earlier in this year on the podcast with educators and people involved in the educational process from different degrees. I reposted some of those interviews last week. Everybody's tuning in. We've got a lot of good listens from that rebroadcast. But the Chicago teachers are striking in part. They're not striking for better salaries. They're striking, and some of their major asks in this collective bargaining is the betterment of the students' lives and learning environments. Yeah. And two things in particular that make me relate to this girl with the school milk. We don't know what she's going through. Mm-hmm. We don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Her mother could be out there to pick her up. Her mother might be abusive.
Right.
She might be a great mother.
Right.
They might be homeless. Something. We don't know. But
they
the
might
teachers,
be hungry.
They might be hungry, right? So the teachers are saying, one, we need the city to commit to addressing student homelessness. Mm-hmm. And two, support staff. We need more support staff in schools. And this connects because we had a lot of conversations with support staff at schools on the podcast. And we learned a lot about everything that goes in. It's not just, okay, there's a teacher, a chalkboard, and students. How can we get that teacher to be more effective? It's not about that.
Right.
It's bigger. These are whole human beings that need development in any given way.
Right.
And we need to commit to those. But schools are peeling back. Librarians, nurses, counselors, everything. And this is what the Chicago teachers understand. We need that. We don't know why this little girl acts the way she does. But I'm going to tell you, the one person who's not going to figure that out is a police officer.
Right.
It's just not. Like, no shade to police officers. Everything I've said on this podcast about police culture notwithstanding, thank you for your service and continue doing it, but not in the face of an 11-year-old girl who has behavior issues, right? With authority. That's not the path.
It's not that they can't. They're in a position to serve in that way, but a lot of times I think ego takes a big role in it just being them against any crime, them, executing the law and not being concerned with the whole person and looking at this holistically and how we can, it's like what we were talking about before, being reactive versus preventative, right? Like, why are we reacting to her stealing milk instead of asking questions about why would she take more milk than we offered her?
Right. Or
why
does she not listen to the
exactly
rules? Why does she not follow instructions? Why does she speak up and get loud? Why did she push the principal out of the way?
Exactly.
Why, right? And this is a culture that I don't know how long it's been developing. Joe Biden famously catches flack for his crime bill that he was authored of. And he had a speech where he said, look, I don't care why people are going to do crimes. I don't care about the home that they grew up in or the psychological issues or whatever. All that matters is this person is about to hit my wife over the head or beat up my sons or whatever. He said he had a whole list of just random rhetorical things.
Right.
But that's not the way we're going to fix it. Like, if you just want to be punitive, okay, but that's not going to address these issues.
Have teachers that are putting their livelihoods on the line because they're literally on the front lines. They're on the ground. They're seeing what's happening, and it's important enough to them that we make a change, and the rest of us are on the periphery not getting that there's someone who's willing to give up their salary, for however long this takes, because this is what's happening to kids. Yeah. Like, if those are their asks, we have to step back again and say, well, why am I acting like this has nothing to do with me?
Yeah. And this week, Monday, October 28th, this is entering the second week of that strike.
Wow.
And it's, my co-host, Jay Callie, is a teacher herself. And like I said already a bunch of times today, we spoke to other people related to the educational process, and these kind of support roles are important. And it might be hard to see if you are raising your family in an environment where your kids don't need those resources.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. So now the next hurdle, like you said, is to how do we, with no frame of reference to that and connection personally to it, how do we bridge that gap to get that to click?
Your kids may not need them, but your kids are going to grow up and interact with these kids that do need them. Your kids are going to have to rely on these other people. They're going to have to live their lives among these other people that do need these resources. So if you're not going to do it for your kids because, like, personally they don't need it because, maybe you have whatever resources they need, then you should be doing it because your kids are going to grow up to interact with these people.
Wow. I didn't expect to get an answer right now. That was a rhetorical question.
Sorry.
And we got the answer.
Sorry.
No, that's good. I wasn't ready for that, but that makes, we're all here together in the end, right? And so we live in silos to some degree, but
it's such a low degree.
it's a lower degree than it seems, I guess, right? Oh man. Well, Dominique, this was an amazing episode of What's the Deal. Thanks for helping me out today.
Of course.
It was great to have you.
It's my pleasure.
Everybody check out We Teach Love. Mm-hmm. It's on where can they catch it?
They can find it on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, Apple, Anchor. There's a whole list of podcasts. You can find our Friday Love Fest episodes on Instagram or YouTube. And can I just plug Haven Firm?
Sure.
If you go to havenfirm.com for any of your real estate needs, that would be much appreciated.
Okay. I'll put that in the episode description.
Okay.
I'm pointing down to it like there's a post right here. But this was awesome. Thanks for coming in. Everybody, I'm Steve Discourse, and that's the deal.
All right, people, thanks so much for tuning in another week to What's the Deal podcast.
You can follow us on social media at Steve Discourse
and at It's J. Callie.
We got to send a huge shout out to my man Clifford Cartel for composing our theme music.
And wherever you listen to this, make sure you subscribe.
Leave us a review because those really help.
Share it with your friends, share it with your family, your loved ones.
Heck, share it with your enemies. We don't care. Just get the word out there. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Why are you writing what I'm going to say? I'm not going to say, hey. Where? What's good, everybody? Angela. Hey. I'm not going to say
That's
that.
That's not what it was. You're reading notes out of context.
As you know, we're back. Yay. I'm not going to say that.
Why are you reading that? Stop it.
What am I supposed to be reading? Back from break. Use 20... Yeah. It's 2019, everybody. The year is almost up, and we really, really, really need your help. You might wonder why. What could I do? I don't know how to record. I don't have access to the studio. You know what you do have access to? The green stuff. The Benjamins, baby. We need your cash. And it's not because we're broke. It's because we spend a lot of money keeping this show gorgeous and sexy. And we need you to put on something tight and help us keep it that way. All right, okay. I don't know what I'm going to say.
What's good, everybody? Steve Discourse here. And listen, if you've liked anything that we've been doing and you appreciate it, we would love for you to just break us off a little bit, throw us some support, because we do need help with some money for online web hosting fees and for editing and recording and producing these episodes. However much you can, $1, $5, $10, $20, anything you want, we really appreciate that.
You can send us donations through our Cash App at WTD Pod. You can also Venmo us at WTD Pod. If you would like to send us monthly payments, which we would be ever so grateful, hit us up on Patreon at patreon.com/what's the deal. Thanks so much.